Hello and welcome to another Demi-Helen tutorial. In this video we're going to be looking at how the bass line has been processed and any elements that aid it in its sound. So as you can hear, this is the main drop after quite a lengthy melody line, and it's going back to some of my original roots of doing this kind of wacky tech trance stuff, if that's what you still call it these days. I never really branded my music with genres and styles and stuff, but it kind of falls into the trance dance section, like kind of hard dance, maybe a little bit influenced. So we're just going to look at the main two elements. We have three, but we're going to look at these two first, where the drop first happens. So we have the Carpenter Brut bass line, which I've adapted to work in here. It's through Hive. They're the settings if you want to pause and have a look and just sort it out. Modulation wheel. No, it's not that one. There's another one. This one is just how it is, as you can see. And there's the effects. The actual preset is available through my Carpenter Brut bassline video, which is on screen now. So you can get it from that video in the description. So this bass is quite chopped up. We've got this kind of rolling trance bass, and then all we've got that's different is a bit of a longer note here, a bit shorter, and then this one comes in before the kind of fourth beat and extends right to the end, and then back into it, and then it's rolling. But here we've got one octave above, and then here we've got one octave above, but we've got an A in there as well, and an E, which drops it back nicely back into B there. Alright, so we're going to listen to this now without any of the inserts on, so please bear with me whilst I remember how to get the mixer up. I'm having one of those moments where I've totally forgot. There we are. Let's turn off inserts. This is what it sounds like with them on. Okay, so we're going to run through these one at once to see how the sound's been achieved. So, starting with FabFilter, I wanted to give it a nice gritty texture. It did start with something else. Anyway, don't matter, that's why there's a space there. So let's turn on FabFilter. Let's just turn it off. Right, so the idea of this one is to add a bit of weight, a bit of grit, and then a really bit of kind of niciness, but cutting some of the lower mids out there from the top band. So you can see I've increased the bass there by plus nearly 2 decibels, and that by plus 5, and that by plus 2. So it's just added a bit of grittiness into it, and that's it. It's just a default setting, split into 3 bands, and you can see I've only altered the tone here on this one. So that's where the first bit of sound comes from. That's kind of the direction I wanted to aim. And then we go into EQ. Now let's have a look at why I've done this, and we'll see how it's working. So I've done a bass roll off at 20 Hz. It's a standard practice to get rid of all that kind of conflicting rumble that you don't want in there. I've boosted it here on, you can see E down here, but this is where it kind of sounded nice on the sweet spot. There's a cut here on an F sharp. If you look down there, purple, there's an F sharp cut, and that is because that is where the main kind of body of the kick drum kicks through. So I've cut it out of there so the kick can kind of breathe straight through. It's got that space to kind of occupy. Here I've introduced some of the more bassy elements, which is kind of the boxy area. So I just wanted some of that characteristic to come through to really help dominate that frequency range, because that's where basses sit really. Then I've cut the kind of mid-range, because this is kind of the lower mids, this is kind of the mid-mids going into the higher mids. And the reason why I've cut these by just over 3 decibels is because, it's just under actually, so it's about 3 decibels, it's because that's where the melody line sits and any vocal lines, kind of the main brash part of the synth lines and stuff and pads, that's where they sit. So you don't want the bass to be too in there with the synths making them sound all like crazily fucking overdone. And then here, just add a bit of brightness in. I've added at 4K there, just plus 2 decibels-ish, just to add a bit of brightness. And then the same again, I've added a bit of a high shelf there just to really accentuate it. It just has that little bit of extra character, and it helps it also dominate the whole track when it's being played on its own, like in this drop. It's got to really sound full and thick. So then I added an exciter using Le Petit Excite. So let's listen to it without it for a second, and then on. So I've turned noise floor on, which is it adds a bit of analogish sound to it, gives you that effect. And I've boosted the lows and the highs a little bit, but very gently, as you can see. You can easily overdo exciting, so I've kind of been very conservative about it there, which just accentuates the highs a bit more and gives it a bit more weight. Turn it off. So it gives it a sense of purpose and the track sits nicely. So from there, we've added a compressor. So let's just... I wanted to uniform the peaks. There were, as you can see, there's a few going a bit too high there. Kind of all over the place and not uniform. So I've just used the classic style here. Set the knee to nearly at full hardness, and the ratio is at infinity near enough. Threshold at -17, that's where it sounded good at the sweet spot. Not set there as preset, it's kind of tailored to the sound of the track and where it fits. Bit of a slower attack and a very long release to stop anything kind of rising back up too quickly, giving you that kind of false sound. You want it to be transparent, the compressor. Then kickstart, self-explanatory. So I've used, I think it's the sub, it's called sub something anyway, and the mix is set at 75% there, so you're still getting some of the details of the first notes, but they're heavily reduced in volume to imitate sidechain. And finally we have an EQ, which is set to mid and side, and then I've set this total roll off to side channel, which in effect makes it mono in the lower end. So keeping this in stereo but keeping this in mono. So let's just listen to that without it. So the whole bass is in stereo, and now up to 237 Hz it'll be mono. So it sounds like it's reduced the bass on the actual bass sound, which yes it has, but then it does get boosted back in here. But we don't want it too bassy, we don't want too much conflict with the kick drum, which is quite weighty, which gives you the illusion that the bass is a lot heavier than it is. Now if I take that away, the kick starts to get drowned out and that bass is really filling up the stereo field, not giving chance for the synths and any other parts to start coming into the track. So it keeps it centered at that point. So that is the shaping of that, and then I was listening to it and thinking it's not enough, and then that's when I copied the gated synth down. So the original gated synth is out of Nexus. I am using detune lead 1 from the single layer leads that you get standard with it. Transgate set to 16 beats in length, and you can see I've just done a quick custom preset there. No other settings amended, apart from obviously these ones. And so I copied those settings and put them down into gated synth 2, which I have not named. That's bad on me. So you get this effect, exactly the same, but you've got the length set to 32, and I've got the preset, the pattern that you can see there. I've just made it like that. Originally it did start like that, and then I put a delay of 1/4, so a quarter, so you kind of get that slow attack effect. Now if I take that off, you'll hear that there is no attack. So that gives it a nice touch to the end of each phrase. So you've got this delay of a quarter of a beat, but then at the same time you've got this accentuated because there are 3 gates open, giving you that kind of rising volume. So it's very nice. It's a very nice touch, and it gives that kind of really tech trance-esque style to it. So that's where that came from, just to finish each end of the phrase. Then the bass sounded a bit too lonely at first, so I accentuated it with this synth line. So let's take a look at how that is built. Now there's a lot going on here. So I copied everything from the first bass to put it into the same kind of sonic spectrum, so it's in the same frequency sort of range. It's hard to describe. It's just so I had a good starting point, then I could tweak things. So FabFilter, all I did is removed one of the bands, so which I like because I've used a preset here, big bass beat. So it's mainly for all around saturation. So it looks like it's made for a kick, I think. But I've just tweaked it there, as you can see. I've made more of the top band more dominating than the lower. So we should have a sound. So that's just shaping that part of the sound. I changed that to a preset. And then I've added hysteresis or whatever you want to call it as it comes, and I've just turned the dry wet down a little bit to give it that kind of distorted feel. If we turn this off, it's more harsh and quite gritty. So let's just start by turning everything else off, like we did on the last one. So this is what it sounded like before. And then we added the Saturn filter to give it that gritty sound. Then we added this in, so it kind of gives it that distorted thing, because there's a lot of stuff going on, stuttering and modulation effects and delay. And then I used the exciter like I did in the other one, and I think it's pretty much the same. Less bass, more top, no floor on because we're not really accentuating the bass there, as you can see at 0. This is more of a upper bass. So without it. So it gives it more of a higher end on there. Then kickstart, which is pretty much exactly the same as that one, self-explanatory. And then I've put a band pass on here to kind of just keep it in this band range, cutting some of the top off and kind of rolling it off somewhere in the region, I think it's, let's just double click there, so yeah, 100 Hertz. Let's just get rid of that. So that gives you this effect. So it concentrates where the bass should be playing in the mix. And then, this is where the magic happens, shuffle stereo. I seem to be peaking there. I've set the width so it's pushed further back in the stereo field. You've got left and right, but then you've got back and forwards. This is pushing it more to the back, so you get it's less centered. So that's centered. And then this is, you get more of a kind of room reverb effect to it because it's giving you that kind of effect of an ambient mic. It's more supportive rather than a main character. So turn it on. So that's pushing it back in the mix a little bit, so it's not the dominant feature. Then I've used built-in Cubase Auto Pan to give it that back and forth movement. So it sounds like it's moving around in space, gives it a bit more effort in the track. Finally, just a limiter to boost the volume here. So I've boosted it by +3 dB there, because we've done a lot of processing which has reduced it down there. So the quickest way, I just put a limiter on. So that's the supportive section. So if we put them together, so you can hear. Now if you take that away, the bass becomes quite boring and flat. It doesn't seem to have any character. When it's supported on its main characteristics, i.e. the longer parts, so at the end of every bar, it gives you that effect. That sounds quite nice. And then obviously we've got the kick. We'll go through the kick in a second, but we'll look at the final part of the bass, which is here. I just wanted to add something a little bit different in there. Again, this is Hive and it's called KS Brutal. So I've probably done a few tweaks there. I can't actually remember what I've done, but pretty much as it comes. And the processing on this one is a lot less if we listen to it without processing. So let's put the Pro Q2 on. I've rolled off the bass at 66 because I don't want it to be too dominating on the bottom. Cut the middle out so the synths can breathe like I was explained on the other one, and then give it a little bit of sparkle. Then the exciter. So we're just giving it a little bit of sparkle, as you can see, 0.85 there, and I've just turned it down. So let's put it back up. So that's all we've done on there, just to excite it a bit. If we just take that off again. It just helps it breathe a little bit. And then Kickstarter, which is quite considerably more mixed in, so you get that kind of really pumped effect. So it's not really taking over the main bass line. Set that away. So it's just adding that little bit of harmonic back into the sound, and then coupled with the bass synth support, you get that whole kind of package. Now, looking at the kick, let's jump into Metrum and have a look at what's going on here. So as you can see, there are 4 parts to the kick. The oscillator here, obviously I've loaded a preset Rob Kick 1, and then I've just tweaked the pitch envelope. So we hit the click of the oscillator on F sharp. We hit the main start of the body of the kick on a B, because that is part of the main kind of chord progression, and then it hits on an F sharp at the sustain section, and then the release at F sharp again, so you get a nice deep booming in tune kick drum. So I'm going to demonstrate now by dragging this up from F sharp to, I don't know, a G sharp, just see how much it makes a difference, because it's out of tune with the track. So as you can hear, it's now at G sharp here on the end of the tail, and it's sounding slightly out. To the untrained ear it sounds okay, but it's not sitting in the mix nicely. So if we just listen to it whilst I drag it down slowly to F sharp, it just lowers that tone just that little bit and puts it into perspective. It's like having the bass line and suddenly dropping it 1 semitone and then wondering why it sounds out of place. It's the same thing for the kick drum. That's the end of the story. So that's how that's tuned. And then these are, I've just shaped them with the amp envelope, so very minimal, but each sound on its own. So you've got the main oscillator, and then we've got a bit of a click going on, and then we have kind of the main click, and then we have a supporter to give it the grittiness. Alright, so that's the kick drum. That's all there is to that. There's no more settings. And then when we jump into here where the kick drum is, I have got it boosted at the F sharp, as you can see down there in green on the piano roll. We have, I think I've just identified the main body of the kick there for reference, and I've cut some of the boxiness out. And the reason is because the bass is occupying that kind of boxy section, because that's where it dominates the most. So if we just take away that, add that boxiness back in. It's very minimal, but to the trained ear it's just cleaning it up a little bit. Then I have just loaded an initial patch on Pro C2, used the classic. As you can see, these are all the settings, but the reason why we've got a slower, a fast attack but not quite at the bottom is purely to stop any clicking occurring, but make the compressor start straight away as soon as it hears that kick drum. And the release is pretty quick but slower than the attack to kind of take it back to volume, so you're not getting it sounding a bit too artificial. It sounds more natural and transparent. And the threshold is set at -9 there, so we just play it. It's just neatening the tops of those up, and it gives it a little bit more boom, and set at a ratio of 4:1, so for every 4 decibels it's reducing it 1 decibel. So it keeps it under control, but it's not shaping the kick too much. If we just play it without it, it's uncontrolled. It just sounds better to me, and it sounds more controlled, and I'm happy I know it's controlled. And then we just have some roll off here in the side channel to make it mono on the lower end. So that's all that. If we listen to all the bass together. Now the kick does need more work, I'm not going to lie about that. But this is a track in progress. Now if we look finally at the bass section, let's get rid of the kick. They're all being routed through to here, which is the bass group channel. Now I've put a Maserati mastering compressor on here, and I've set it to master, and I've just tweaked the settings to how I want the bass to sound. So if we just listen to all of it without anything on, that's how it comes through from the processing that I've done here. So the Maserati gives it its character, really accentuates the highs and gives it a bit of power in the low, whilst controlling the mids. And then we jump into an EQ, and again do that all important cut there for the main body of the kick to cut through to make sure it's not occupied too much again from the processing from the Maserati, and boosted here again, rolled off to get rid of some of the confusing frequencies. Then we have, and we are clipping again, I'll have to sort that out, we have max bass. Now max bass is a very difficult topic to get into, but it's psychoacoustics. So you're taking bass away, but you can kind of add it back in from the divisions of the higher frequencies. So if we just look at EQ again. So the fundamental frequency is always here, it's like the bass note. So say that's the fundamental frequency there. All these upper ones are divisions, multiplications of the fundamental frequency. So if the fundamental frequency is 100 Hz, then its next harmonic is going to be at 200 Hz, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. That's why you see it go right up there and it starts getting really peaky here. So what max bass does is takes those top peaks and adds them all together, subtracts them all to get back to the frequency down here, so it gives you a false bass line. It's more designed for smaller speakers, so you can get bass out of smaller speakers that don't really have much power. Very loosely giving you an idea there, I'm not 100% accurate on that description, so don't hold me to it. So we've added the max bass on there, so if we just listen to it added in, very subtle, but we can listen to what max bass is doing here. There is a bit of bass there, especially in the headphones. You won't be able to hear anything on the computer, but there's a bit of bass there, and this is the original max bass and mixed together. And you can set the frequency here of where you kind of want it to start moulding the the max bass into the mix. And then finally we have a compressor, which is set from the bass presets here at DI Attack Enhancer, which helps it give it a really spiky attack. It's a lot smoother if you take this off. So it's accentuating all those kind of peaks. And that's how I've got to where I am with the bass line. That's the shaping. I really do hope it's give you a good insight into how I've approached this track. And that processing goes across and meets also the other type of bass line that I've done here. So it kind of molds into both sections. You've got that kind of really slow bass line that's pitch shifting everywhere, and then you've got this really fast-paced one for the drop here. So it works in both sections. I hope it makes sense. It seems to be a bit of a loose video in my opinion, but I thought I'd just put some out there for you to kind of look at how I'm approaching tracks at the moment. We'll probably look at the synths maybe in the next video and just show you how I've got to where I am on those and get to hear the melody. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.